Before we start today's episode, I would like to quickly read you our podcast disclaimer. The content in this podcast is for general reference and educational purposes only. It is not meant to be complete or exhaustive or to be applicable to any specific individual's medical condition. No information provided in this podcast constitutes medical advice and is not an attempt to practice medicine or to provide specific medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. This podcast does not create a physician-patient relationship and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please do not rely on this podcast for emergency medical treatment. Remember that everyone is different, so make sure you consult your own healthcare professional before seeking any new treatment and before you alter, suspend, or initiate a new change in your routine. Welcome to The Starting Gate. We're your hosts, Dr. Kitty Dotson
and Dr. Sarah Sheets,
two internal medicine doctors who spent years practicing traditional primary care. Over time, we realized something was missing from modern healthcare. A real understanding of how everyday lifestyle choices impact overall health.
We'll help you cut through the noise of the countless health influencers and their conflicting opinions, because no matter who you follow, the basics of lifestyle medicine are at the heart of it all.
Welcome to The Starting Gate. We're your hosts, Dr. Kitty Dotson
and Dr. Sarah Sheets.
So today we are changing focus and we are going to be talking about the body's largest organ, which is skin. We're going to get into how to care for it, how to protect it, and how to help it age well. If you are someone that feels overwhelmed when you are walking down the skincare aisle, which is me, or just wondering if you even need sunscreen when it's cloudy outside, this episode will hopefully answer all those questions. We're going to be covering the daily basics, how to wash your face, how to moisturize, what products are worth your time, and also what role lifestyle plays in your skin's health. Because what you eat, how you sleep, and even your stress levels can all show up on your face.
We're really excited today. We are here with our guest, Dr. Brooke Jeffy. She's a board-certified medical and cosmetic dermatologist who practices in Scottsdale, Arizona. She has a unique approach to skincare. She looks at skin as part of the whole body and recommends lifestyle modification to help achieve the results you want as well. She's been featured in many news outlets and is on the beauty advisory board for Elle magazine. She's also a Kentucky girl like us, and she had her undergrad degree at the University of Kentucky and did all of her medical training at the University of Louisville. So we're very excited to have her on the show today. Dr. Jeffy, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. And thank you so much for having me today. It's great to be chatting with some other Kentucky girls, and I feel like my accent is definitely going to start coming out. I love this.
It's okay. Safe space here.
Right. No, I love it. Yeah, so I have been in practice for about 13 years now, which is insane to say out loud. And most of those years I was in a traditional employed position, about 10 of those years. And the practice I was with, I was happy and comfortable. It was easy to go to work and come home, but I started to really feel like I was missing out on ways to educate my patients, just only able to spend a couple minutes with them, 3 to 5 minutes. And for a lot of things in dermatology, I just felt like there were some lifestyle measures that we weren't able to cover in that time. And then the practice I was with sold to private equity, and that was the kick that I needed to go and start my own thing. So my new practice is a direct pay model, so I can spend a lot more time with my patients out here in Scottsdale, where I've been most of that time I've been in practice. I am really passionate about helping people understand skincare, and that is a little bit unique to me. Derms actually don't get a ton of training in skincare in residency. It's something you really have to take on and learn a little bit more on your own. And I'm really focused with trying to help kids start on a really good regimen and healthy habits to have a lifetime of healthy skin and a healthy body. So with that, I actually also am the founder of a skincare line for kids called Between. And then I love doing outreach. So things like this, educating on these topics for moms that have kids. Of course, I also love talking to moms about their skincare journey as well. I guess I should also say I'm a mom to a 15-year-old and a wife, of course, as well, and a dog mom too.
Love that. Love that. And I love the passion for helping young adults as well as young kids and helping with their skin routines. Because I will say I had zero growing up. Like anything bad, I probably did it. And I do know with this younger generation, they are paying attention. But now it's become so confusing because they have access to social media and it makes it feel almost overwhelming that there's so much that they should be doing. So we've gone from doing nothing to doing probably too much and trying to find that middle of the road approach. And that's one of the things we loved about your social media is you really do focus on teaching basics.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. It's really a double-edged sword with the social media. Of course, it's great that information is accessible to kids, but it is almost too much and it gets overwhelming and it gets into this whole idea of it being more of influence to do and use certain things and where they're getting their information and who they're getting it from and how this whole conversation affects their self-esteem and how they interact with people. And it's just it's interesting times, but I think it really does all come down to that kind of double edge of the social media exposure for kids and this interest in skincare.
Today, we really want to make sure we go over the basics. And to get started, can you just tell us what is happening with our skin as we age?
There's some characteristic things that we appreciate on the skin and in the structure of the face that we all interpret as aging. So on the skin, you start to see things like pigment changes, either hyperpigmentation or hypopigmentation. You start to see broken blood vessels in some people. You start to see the changes associated with collagen breakdown, so fine wrinkling in the skin. You also start to see deeper wrinkles due to constant facial movement and expressions, as well as the fact that we lose fat as we age. Fat also moves in our face due to the constant pull of gravity. And then there's also bone resorption that happens. So we don't have all these structures holding our face up. So it's a very complicated process that sort of leads to this aged appearance. And there's some factors we can control, right? And there's some that we can't. We can't control our genetics. We can't control the things that occur in terms of cellular aging, but we can control extrinsic factors associated with aging. So these are things like radiation from the sun, whether or not we smoke or do other risky behaviors like ingest alcohol, and certainly our nutrition choices.
And so, starting at a young age, what are some of those daily skincare steps that you can do in order to help mitigate some of these changes that are going to occur over time?
When we're talking about the skincare that we can use, the most important thing is, of course, sunscreen. And that's really a focus of mine when talking with younger people is the earlier we can start that, the better off we will be, the better off we will look, and the less chance we're going to have over time of developing enough damage to form a skin cancer. So sunscreen is, in fact, the most important. And unfortunately, we're in a time right now where that's actually controversial, which I can't believe I have to say. We could obviously talk about a lot of different ways to protect from the sun, but that has to be part of your strategy because 90% of what we interpret as age-related changes on the skin are actually due from radiation from the sun. So sunscreen or sun protection is key. I also think it is incredibly important just thinking about the steps that we might be using to cleanse the skin. It's amazing to me how many adults I will talk to even who don't wash their face every day, particularly in the evening. At night when we're sleeping, that is when our skin barrier tries to repair itself. Our skin cells turn over, which is part of the normal process of the skin. And we don't want things like sunscreen or other products we've had on, our pollution from the day to be sitting there on that surface as the skin is trying to do those things. So I do think using a cleanser is incredibly important. And then usually we're going to also need a moisturizer. So those are the basic steps that anyone needs: sunscreen, a cleanser, and a moisturizer. And then, of course, depending on what's going on, if you're an adult and you have some age-related changes that you want to try to improve with certain things, you add things. Or if you're a kiddo that has acne, you add things or choose certain products with certain actives to help with those issues.
I will say, you had an Instagram post recently about how do you wash your face? And that is something I thought, of course I know how to wash my face. Been doing that for 40 years. And then I watched your video and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not washing my face right. You were talking about making sure you get to the very outer edge of your face to your hairline. I'm never good about that. And then you were talking about making sure you have a clean, fresh towel every time you dry your face. I was like, oh, another everything I'm doing wrong.
We're doing the basics today. How do you wash your face?
It's so important. And if you're just not doing it adequately, you're not getting the benefit of doing it. Why are you even doing it? And then you're missing out on one of the basic steps, right? So it's an important conversation to have. So yeah, you want to be sure that you are cleansing your skin for at least 30 to 60 seconds as well. I prefer that you do use your hands. So I think you said that's what you were doing, which is great. I don't love like a washcloth necessarily, particularly a very heavy, thick one. I love just using hands. That's my preferred method. But yeah, you have to get the entire surface of the face, the 30 to 60 seconds, warm water, and then splashing or using a washcloth gently to get that cleanser off. But yeah, using a clean towel. Maybe throughout the day, you've dried your hands and there's certain microbes there. It's another conversation, but there is evidence that biofilms, or even after we've washed the towels, may play a role in things like acne or changing our microbiome. So if you really wanted to take it even a step further, there are these biodegradable single-use types of towels that you can use. So yeah, that's a whole area that's evolving. The other thing I would say with the face washing is that sometimes just using a gentle face wash is not enough. If you're someone wearing makeup or some kind of tinted product or even just sunscreen, I think a lot of times the basic cleanser doesn't remove it well enough, even if you are doing the 60 seconds of it. So I actually recommend doing a double cleanse with something like a micellar water or an oil-based cleanser first at bedtime, and then using your cleanser. And also that just increases the chances that you're doing it long enough, because even though I tell you to do it 30, 60 seconds, you're probably not.
Yeah,
No way.
I'm
Good
doing that.
prediction. Good prediction.
But that's so true too, because especially if I've worn a mineral-based sunscreen, and we'll talk more about sunscreen here in a few minutes, but if I've had that on and I wash my face, afterwards I can still see some of it on there. And I see this with my kids too. So it does take longer.
Yeah, and you can do a little test if you think that your cleanser might be enough. And I'll say this using toner, which I don't necessarily love, but a toner or a wipe, some of those cleansing wipes that are a little more abrasive, after you've used your cleanser, use one of those as a little test and see, is there still, I mean, obviously if you can visibly see it, it's a problem, but if you can't visibly see it and you do a little test like that and you look at the wipe you're using, and if there's some discoloration there, your cleanser isn't doing it all.
Now, is there something specific that people should look for in their basic cleanser? Because there's such a variety, it gets confusing.
Yeah, I think most of the major brands out there do a pretty good job of telling you what skin type their product is for. And I think you have to rely on that a little bit. Most people, I think, can have a general idea of what their skin type is. Is it oily? Then choose something that it says it's for more oily skin. If you tend to be sensitive to tons of things and you react, then choose a product that says it's for sensitive. And maybe if you're in the middle, you can get away with one that just says it's for normal skin. The cleansers are pretty easy to navigate that way.
It's just, you're always like, am I spending my money in the right place? And am I doing the right stuff? Because when it comes to these products, there's so many that you don't want to waste your money.
Yeah, true. And with the cleanser, I wouldn't necessarily spend a lot of money there, because regardless of what's in there, you are rinsing it away.
Yeah.
So, how much of that vitamin C that might be in there or glycolic acid that might be in there, how much of that is staying and doing anything? I don't know. But I will say that if you are tending to break out, or you're older and your skin kind of is a little bit dull, salicylic acid cleansers, that particular active, I think is a very legitimate type of ingredient in a cleanser, because it just really enhances the cleaning power of your cleanser to really get deeper into the pores.
Well, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Yes. And then going on to the next aspect, you mentioned moisturizers. What do we do? I can stare at these for hours and still feel like I have no idea what to pick.
Yeah, to some degree, again, the larger brands will try to give you an indication of who the moisturizing part is really for. If you're someone who has really oily skin, you are probably not going to want a cream type of product. It just is probably not going to feel great, a cream or an oil-based product. But the main ingredients that you find in moisturizers in general are all pretty similar across brands and across formulations. It's just the vehicles differ. And I think that plays a role in the kind of acceptability depending on what your skin type is. And so those ingredients and how moisturizers work, we can delve into if you want to. But with the moisturizers, I think it can make sense if you are someone who has a problem to look for additional ingredients in there that could help your issues. If you're a woman who has hyperpigmentation or you're concerned about aging, you maybe choose something that has some glycolic in there or vitamin C or a retinoid.
So I did not have a skincare routine for most of my life. And then a few years ago, looked in the mirror and thought, oh my gosh, I am looking old, and talked to my sister about it. And she couldn't believe I didn't have a skincare routine. So I ended up buying everything that she was using. And so I ended up using a different moisturizer at night than I did in the morning. Do we need to be using different moisturizers at different times of the day?
Not necessarily, but maybe it'll be helpful if I tell you a hierarchy of ingredients that you might want to look for, say, like in your situation, and you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't really been doing anything, and I'm starting to see these age-related changes. So the things you might want to think about is, number one, being sure you have your sunscreen and sun protection on point. But the next important active in this situation is going to be a retinoid. You could get that in a serum potentially. You could get that in a moisturizer potentially. But a retinoid is the key next step. After that, you think about vitamin C's and whether that comes in your moisturizer or you're using a separate serum. But vitamin C is next key ingredient. After that, probably I would say some kind of product that has peptides. And the thing is, you can get a lot of these moisturizers that have all these things I'm saying in it. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily mean you have to break up every step, but I'm just going through the actives. And so peptides next. And then after that, maybe you go into things like growth factors. And then beyond that, there's this new category of things like exosomes. You're covering most of the base, I think, if you get the retinoid, the vitamin C, and the sunscreen.
How good are the over-the-counter retinoid products as opposed to getting prescription tretinoin from your doctor?
I definitely think that they are helpful. And if you can't see a dermatologist for whatever reason, don't want to spend the money on a prescription tretinoin, retinols over the counter, any of the retinoids available over the counter are great. I do think that they help. They may not help as fast, but I do think that they are helpful. The other issue that always is a concern with retinoids is the potential for irritation. So as we get to stronger products, like your tretinoins, for example, they're more irritating to the skin. So there's always this balance that we have to figure out based on frequency of use, other products you're using, moisturizers that you might be using with your retinoid to try to get someone to tolerate it. And sometimes it's just a lot easier to tolerate an over-the-counter retinol because they're not as irritating potentially.
I started my retinoid around 40, and I realized that was probably later than I should have. But is there a too early time to be using a retinoid, or when do you usually recommend people start one?
That's a great question. So I generally recommend retinoids no earlier than like late 20s. Yes, ideally you would have potentially started it earlier, but it is still going to be beneficial for you. The reason that you don't want to use it earlier is, and I'm talking about for anti-aging purposes, okay? We use retinoids all the time for kids who have acne, but that's a different situation. But when you're talking about anti-aging, this is a huge thing going on with this interest in kids and skincare is they are using retinol products when they're way too young and they just don't get any benefit out of it. It's all risk. It's just that risk for irritation, which is even more likely to happen because their skin is so much more sensitive. And there's just no benefit because they have all of their collagen. Collagen does not start breaking down until in the 20s. There's no reason for them to be using it unless they have acne.
Is there any of these other in your hierarchy that you just provided that should not be started at a young age?
Yeah, I don't think kids need any of that stuff.
It's great to hear.
Yeah. So I will say, okay, vitamin C can be used in products as more of an antioxidant, which I do think is fine for kids. But vitamin C is really complicated because there's so many forms of vitamin C. But if it is one that is in a product and it's more of an antioxidant type of goal, then that's okay. But kids should not be using like 15% ascorbic acid. That is really for hyperpigmentation in adults. They don't have hyperpigmentation generally, and that can be really irritating to the skin. And then in terms of the other things I mentioned, they're just not really getting any benefit out of these things.
It's good to know. Another type of cream, whether or not you spend your money on it, is there's so many different types of creams for under your eyes. It's okay, you have your whole face, and then your eyes are this whole different ballpark. How should you address that part of your face?
Yeah, and I don't even necessarily think you have to use a different product. You can just use your products up there. Take them up to the lash line. I think it really is just to sell more product largely. Now, there are specific issues that maybe you have under your eye that you don't have somewhere else, and maybe you want to use a targeted product then. Or maybe like you have puffiness, for example, and so you want to use something that has caffeine. And so you want to use an eye cream that has that to help with the puffiness. So there's certain instances where it could make sense to use a separate cream, or you just have hyperpigmentation there and you get an eye product that has a lot of brighteners and can help with that. But you don't have to use a separate product. You also don't have to use a different sunscreen. There are now specific eyelid sunscreens, and you don't really need that. You can just use the same sunscreen you're using on the rest of your face. And also, don't forget the neck and chest. Just it's all one unit.
So when we're putting our moisturizer on, we should be including our neck and chest.
Do all the same things there and do them on your hands too for extra credit, because you're not going to like that when you're older either.
Good point. I've not been doing that. And a common issue that many people experience specific to their eyes are dark circles. Is there something that is worth time and energy to try to help with that?
I do think retinoids, vitamin C, niacinamide, these are all things that can help brighten and improve that area. The issue with like darkness under the eyes is it can have so many factors. It can be pigment, sun damage, for example. It can be that pigment like in the skin, but also that area thins in a lot of people with time. So it will get misinterpreted that it's a dark circle, but really it's like veins, vasculature that's getting seen under there. Or people will have significant allergies and they'll get just edema and I'm not thinking of the right word here. Like vascular congestion. There you go. And that gives like this discolored look. And the other thing is eye bags. So another thing that'll happen to that area as we age is that you get changes in the ligaments that kind of hold the fat pad back there, breaks down. And in some people that fat poofs out and then that causes a shadowing. And so some of these issues are things that an eye cream is not going to fix.
So speaking of that, I don't know how good your camera is if you can really see my lovely eye bags, but I tried this product that was like clay based and you put it on and then as it dries, it pulls your bags up.
How did that go for you?
I mean, it did make my bags look smaller, but it left like a weird kind of shiny residue. So it wasn't something I was going to do all the time. And then I wasn't sure, did it stretch my skin or something in a way that would make things worse than it was anyways?
Yeah, no, I also hate my eye bags. So don't think I have not tried all of these things. And I can't remember the ingredient that does it in those products like you're talking about, but it does work. But the problem is that it does not leave the skin looking normal there, right? And you can't really put anything over it or it'll start to like pile up and it's not really a usable in life product, but it does look cool and it does do that. I wish there was some way that could be utilized, but I don't think we're there yet. If you're struggling with that area, maybe seeing someone to be sure to identify like what the problem is. And if it truly is eye bags, which sounds like it probably is for you since it's improving with that, it's really things like some lasers might give you some benefit like CO2 aggressively in that area. Certain really deep chemical peels can actually get a lot of tightening to hold that back. But really it's a blepharoplasty, right? To pull that fat out of there would be really the ideal solution to that problem.
Yeah, I've got that on my wish list for some point in life.
Me too.
Moving on from our creams into sunscreen. And as you said, this has become very controversial. Do we use sunscreen? Do we not use sunscreen? Which type of sunscreen? Which type of SPF? We have made this now so complicated. Can you please just distill it back to the basics of what we should be thinking about when it comes to sunscreen and how we even pick one today?
It's a huge topic. I would tell you that the thing we should be relying on most is sun protective clothing. Keep your body covered to the extent possible. And then the common sense things like being in the shade, avoiding peak hours. I'm definitely a proponent of those things. And sun protective clothing is much better than sunscreen because you don't have to remember to reapply it. You don't have to be sure you're using enough of it. You don't have to worry about if you're sweating it off. These are all problems with sunscreen. So we try to rely on the sun protection as much as possible is what I encourage. But there are areas that you just can't do that with unless you're going to wear some sort of face mask all the time. So you're left with having to cover small areas with sunscreen. Of course, I'm going to say that I would rather you be using any sunscreen than no sunscreen because it is a fact that the sun causes skin cancer and ages your skin. In terms of the options for sunscreens, there's mineral sunscreens and then there are chemical sunscreens. Mineral sunscreens are titanium and zinc based. I like to tell people if you see titanium and zinc, it's a mineral sunscreen. Anything else, it's a chemical sunscreen. You don't have to care about those names that you can't pronounce. Anything else, it's a chemical. The controversy here, I guess there's many controversies, but one of the biggest controversies is that we do know that the chemical sunscreens can be measured in our blood. This is usually in situations where there's a ton of exposure. We know this based in lab studies, of course. So these are very controlled settings where the sunscreen is applied, a very thick amount applied very frequently. But even in real world situations, there probably is some absorption that can be measured. What we don't know is what does that mean? We have no knowledge of what that does. So if you want to avoid all that, you just use a mineral sunscreen. And there's tons of mineral sunscreens out there. They're not absorbed. That kind of just avoids the whole problem. When you're looking for a sunscreen, minimum SPF 30. So SPF refers to the protection from UVB rays. All the sun's rays can contribute to aging and skin cancer. UVB is really associated with burning. So that's what the SPF rating tells you about. And SPF 30 blocks 97% of the UVB rays. Nothing gets you to 100. So the bulk of that protection comes at 30. That's what I recommend to my patients. Minimum SPF 30. If you want to reach for something stronger at the beach, go for it. And then you want it to say broad spectrum because that's the wording that most US sunscreens use to indicate that they protect from UVA to some degree. Some sunscreens now we're starting to see the PA rating, which is a series of plus signs, and 4+ is the strongest. But broad spectrum is what you want. You also want water resistant to give you a little bit of protection from sweating. But with all of these things, you do want to reapply every 2 hours. We know in real world situations that people get about half the level of protection because they just are not using enough and not reapplying enough. And this also feeds in to another misconception about sunscreens that's getting talked a lot about now is, okay, well, now there's so much more skin cancer. So why is that happening? Is it the sunscreen that's causing it? My response to that is that it takes many years for damage to accumulate in our cells to produce skin cancer. We live a lot longer than we used to. There are other factors that are likely contributing potentially from our environment that may be accelerating this too. And also, they're diagnosed more, right? People notice these things. They've been educated, so the diagnosis happens more. So that is my rant on some of the sunscreen controversy. Actually, I forgot one part of my rant. People think that they're protected from sunscreen, protected from radiation from the sun, and they have this confidence. They're using sunscreen, so I should be able to be out in there more. And that also contributes, I think, to that problem.
Oh, that's a very good point. Because if you're out there, you're not getting burnt. You are using some sunscreen, but you're still having constant exposure.
And you think, oh, I'm using sunscreen, so I should be protected. So I see a lot of that in my office. People will say, well, I use sunscreen, but I tanned. I got tan anyway. And they probably weren't using enough. They probably didn't reapply it frequently enough. And it's not 100% protection.
So I think people think about sunscreen when they're going to the pool or the beach or even just going to be out at the park for a while. But what about those days where you're maybe running some errands, you're in your car for a while, you're in and out of buildings? Do you need sunscreen on those days too?
You do, for a few reasons. One, if you, like, let's say it's winter, you're in Kentucky, it's overcast, you get out of that habit. That's one problem. You want to stay with the habit of using the sunscreen all the time. If it's later in the day, the sun's radiation is not just coming from above. It is bouncing off of surfaces. It's an ambient type of exposure. So you really do need sunscreen if the sun is visible. You do need it if you're just running some errands. You mentioned the car. So most windshields, they only protect from UVB. They do not protect at all from UVA. So you want to certainly be using a sunscreen when you're driving around a lot. But yeah, in and out of the car, it all adds up. And yes, there's the skin cancer risk, but also there's just, you're not going to, you want to look as nice as your skin can as you age. You got to do it every day.
Where I struggle here is I feel like I have not been able to find a sunscreen where I put it on in the morning and I don't feel like I'm wearing sunscreen, or it breaks me out, or I've tried some of the tinted ones and it looks cakey. And I've even tried buying some of the more expensive ones to see how they work, and then they still might not look good or make me break out. And so I get frustrated because I don't want to spend more money, keep trying all these different ones. What is your advice for that?
Yeah, I mean, sunscreen is incredibly personal. It is trial and error, but there are so many products out there. You should be able to find one that you like. But I know that's tough. And like you said, it costs money to buy some of these, and particularly some that are a little bit nicer formulation cost a little bit more. And someone like yourself that mentioned that you're breaking out a lot with them, I would definitely try to stick with some zinc or titanium based ones, because sometimes the chemical ones will be a little more irritating, which can contribute to breakouts. But that's also not 100%. Unfortunately, this is the case with all of skincare. Just because many people tolerate something doesn't mean you're going to be the person that tolerates it, or combination with other things that you're using might lose some tolerability. I appreciate your issue, but it is just, you should be able to find something that you can handle. It's just trial and error.
All right, I hear you. Keep trying. I'll find one.
Keep trying, focus on maybe just the mineral ones. And then there are so many products now that add the moisturizer too. I think you mentioned that maybe you didn't like the way they necessarily felt on the skin. So there's a lot of lighter weight versions now that are more liquid that don't feel as heavy.
Now, speaking of that and things feeling heavy, we all have kids here, and applying sunscreen on kids can be challenging. And sometimes we'll want to lean into some of the spray options. What is your thoughts about some of the spray sunscreens?
So I do think sprays work as sunscreen, but you have to be sure that you spray them so much on the skin that the skin looks wet and glistening, and then you rub it in. You can't just do like a fine little mist and think you're getting much protection. So most people are not using them correctly. So for kids, of course, I'm always going to recommend, I know you get to an age where they're more resistant to this, but trying to use sun protective clothing, rash guards, things like that when they're in the pool. So you just don't have to keep hunting them down and slathering sunscreen on them. But you can do the sprays, spray it, a lot of it in your hand and put it on their skin, or spray it till it's wet, like we talked about. There is, of course, chemical propellants in some of these aerosolized sunscreens. I would say trying to be sure that you're not breathing deeply where you're spraying it. There are brands that don't have chemical propellants. There's a brand called Elta MD that dermatologists love, myself included, and their spray sunscreen is mineral and it does not have any chemical propellant.
I love that brand. It's pretty nice.
Yeah. Yeah, you should try that one. The new one, it's called UV Recovery. It's mineral, it's hydrating, very low irritation potential, I think, for most people. Give it a whirl.
All right, I will.
And with our kids, I don't think about putting sunscreen on my kid's face every day. Is that something that we should be thinking about? Like, I do for myself, but I'm not doing that for my kids.
Yeah, that is a habit that you can get them started early and just make them realize that's kind of part of it. Another reason is that, and this is the reason that I'm really passionate about talking to kids and trying to get those tweens to be started on a simple regimen, is because if they're used to doing that consistently, as they approach those years where they may be more prone to breaking out, maybe that's going to happen less because they're in the habit of cleaning their skin. But sunscreen, to that point, is also important in acne treatment and prevention, because the skin barrier is affected negatively by chronic radiation. So using a sunscreen not only reduces their chance over time of all the things that we don't want to happen, but also acne. So it is important in kids.
I'm going to have to think about that one.
And what about those brushes? They look like a makeup brush, but there's some sort of mineral in there.
Oh.
Are those protective too? It feels like they're cheating.
Yeah, I think the powders are okay in a pinch and okay for a touch-up. I've heard of some parents actually, that's what they use in this situation that you guys were mentioning. That's easier, more acceptable to their kids. They find it maybe a little bit more fun. So they're just trying to use that as the sun protection. And that should not be the primary layer of sun protection. I think its place is really for people wearing makeup who cannot apply another coating of their traditional sunscreen and can use the powder as a touch up, but definitely not as a primary. You just are not getting an even coating on there. So it's largely a no for me.
Anything else we may be missing with our usual sunscreen use?
Yeah, I'd love to just say that one thing too is that a lot of times women feel like their makeup is adequate protection. So maybe you're using a foundation that has an SPF of some sort. Oftentimes the SPF even indicated is too low. Like a lot of times it's a 15 in those products. But even if you do find one that's a 30, it's very unlikely that you are using enough of that to get that amount of protection. Because remember, it's 2 to 3 fingers if you're going to use that, which there's some controversy there too. But if you're going to use 2 to 3 fingertip lengths of sunscreen, are you using that much foundation? Probably not.
So let's switch off to one of Kitty's and my favorite topics, and that's lifestyle, things that can impact your skin. And I know something that I felt like I always got really confused about as a physician and providing advice on was, how does your nutrition impact your skin? Can what you eat actually make your skin less clear? Are there things that trigger more acne? I just felt like I always got such confusing information from people. I didn't really know how to advise my patients well on this.
What we eat definitely, as you guys know, matters to our overall health, but then of course is reflected in the skin too. When I'm talking to patients just generally about their skin health and they don't necessarily have a specific concern, I really encourage them to focus on eating fruits and vegetables as well as healthy fats, having a diet rich in antioxidants as well as healthy fats to support cells, I think is super important. But in terms of what I counsel my patients with acne, I think definitely there is no question that eating highly processed foods as well as high glycemic index, high sugar foods influences acne. And I do encourage all my patients to think about that. It's tough because most of these are younger people, and these are all the things we want to eat, which I'm sure you guys struggle with on the daily as well. So for me, what I try to do is talk to them about this concern and encourage them to make small steps that are in that right direction. It is really interesting to me that when I'm talking to teens about this, a lot of times they're shocked, and so are their parents. And they will say to me that I am the only doctor that has mentioned nutrition to them. And they're like, oh my gosh, you're a dermatologist. Why are you talking to me about this? And I just feel like that's a really sad thing to say, but I get it. I know the time constraints and everything. But that's my approach to it, is just to try to encourage them to take baby steps. But I do think it's important. I think that also dairy is a contributor. I think there is plenty of evidence that shows that dairy, in particular skim milk, is more contributory to acne through stimulation of various pathways that ultimately lead to increased oil production. And one key part of that is whey, which is also a dairy protein. And I do encourage all of my acne patients to completely remove whey from their diet. And that's actually popping up in a lot more products now. So
It's in everything now.
yeah. So I tell people, if you see an oatmeal or a pancake mix or something that says it's high protein, like it's probably got whey in it. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And then I do also think that gut health plays a significant role in the health of our skin and potentially for acne. Probiotics are definitely something that I talk to patients about, and not necessarily that they have to take a supplement, but fermented foods, yogurts with live cultures, things like that, which I'm sure you guys probably feel similarly about in terms of trying to get things from foods rather than supplements, and supplementing when there's not a choice.
I'm just going to pause right there. Do you see yogurt negatively impacting acne as much as, like you had mentioned, skim milk? Because I know yogurt is this weird being.
Yeah.
it has a little bit different. It's a dairy product, but it does have some different properties.
Exactly. I think having some yogurt in the diet is going to be potentially acceptable. A lot of time, there is a lot of like trash yogurt out there, though, that doesn't even have any live cultures. So that's something I point out to people. And there's also non-dairy yogurts that have live culture supplemented in them too. So there's ways to get around that too. But yeah, it's definitely interesting because it's similar to the cheese situation with acne. Probably has to do with some of the processing part of it, that cheese is not as clearly associated with acne as other milk products are, and something to do with the processing.
Oh, that's interesting. What about aside from acne? Are there any dietary recommendations that you have for people just wanting to try to help their skin age well?
I try to encourage patients to just eat the rainbow, have lots of antioxidants available, probiotics. In addition to the antioxidants and healthy fats, I think that, and this goes along with healthy fats, but omega-3s are really important. One thing that happens is with age for us is that we get really dry. Our skin dries out for a couple of different reasons. And I think supplementing with omega-3 can be helpful with that.
And then what is your take on ingesting collagen and if that would help your skin?
This is interesting. If you would have asked me this a couple of years ago, I would have said that is useless. Don't do it. But there are now some studies that do show an improvement in skin quality in terms, probably it's primarily moisturizing, but some improvement in the appearance of the skin with collagen supplementation. So I am for it now. I'm not sure that I really understand why it works necessarily, but it does seem to improve skin quality. Now, that's different from putting it on topically. There are products now, they have collagen in them and they advertise that. And I think most consumers think, oh, I'm slathering some collagen on the surface of my skin. This is going to be great. No, but it is an effective moisturizer. It does help to moisturize the skin, but it's not technically improving your collagen when you put it on topically.
Yeah, I've had a hard time understanding collagen helping skin because it has such little impact on other aspects of the body because we break it down once we digest it. So I'm still scientifically trying to understand that.
Yeah. We don't know of some mechanism where it gets to the skin and links up with your collagen and strengthens, whatever it may do. But there are studies that show people ingesting it have improved cosmetic characteristics of their skin. That is primarily with marine collagen. So that's versus bovine, at least from what I've seen at this point.
One big lifestyle bucket we've been spending a lot of time on this summer is sleep. How important is sleep for your skin?
Incredibly important. We talked a little bit earlier in the podcast about how overnight is when your skin does a lot to repair itself in terms of there's enhanced cell turnover, which makes our skin smoother, improves the texture, the luminosity. It's also when the skin barrier works to rehydrate itself. Cortisol levels decrease and we have less of the consequences of that on the skin. So I do think that adequate sleep is incredibly important, especially for people breaking out, but also for just in general overall health.
I am a side sleeper.
Yeah.
And when I wake up in the morning, you can definitely tell I have lines on my face. Is it better if I'm concerned about lines on my face or wrinkles? Is it better to try to sleep on your back?
I actually think it probably is better to sleep on your back for 8 hours or however long you're pushing against and creating a fold that is going to want to stay there. Also, like chest, we definitely see inside sleepers, they'll tend to have some kind of characteristic fold in the chest. And it's just because it's the length of time, I think, that you're in that position. There are pillows. If you're a side sleeper, there's pillows that try to hold you in that position, deter you from turning over. This is also potentially a use, and sometimes I can't believe I'm going to say this, but for these tapes that you see, I don't think that they really erase lines, but it could make sense to put some of these tapes on the skin to keep that fold from being so tight, like when you sleep on it. So maybe that could be a use there and help with that. But yeah, I definitely think it is a thing, and it is better to sleep on your back from a skin cosmetic wrinkling perspective. I have one of those pillows, but I'm a side sleeper and 100% that side of my face is different.
Yeah, I'm a side sleeper as well. It's hard to switch. What about movement? Do you see a
Mhm.
difference in people who exercise versus those who don't in their skin?
Absolutely. There are studies that indicate that if you do things like resistance training, for example, that you can improve the crepiness of the skin, most likely due to improvements in collagen there. So I do try to tell that to my older patients who are starting to appreciate that. But obviously, ideally, you would be doing this and encouraging muscle mass from a much younger time. But the nice thing about dermatology is you can convince people to do some things that maybe they wouldn't because they see that visible consequence of it. I do think that exercise also obviously stimulates blood flow, which is going to be helpful to all the processes in the skin, helpful for hair growth. So, yeah, definitely important.
Another one I think is obvious is some of substance uses of alcohol, tobacco, and their impact on skin. One of the question that comes is if you stop them, can you go backwards in time? Can your skin start to look better again? Or is the damage done? And I guess we can break it down to alcohol, one bucket, tobacco, one bucket. But is the damage that's done already done and hard to reverse it?
Yeah, I think to some extent it's done. Obviously, removing those exposures is going to help mitigate the future breakdown. And you could do some other things like exercise, topical retinoids, things like this to try to, and strict sun protection to try to mitigate some of that. But I think largely the damage is done. I know like internally, obviously, there's some improvements you can get when you stop alcohol, things like that, improve liver function, what have you. But I think it's tough with the skin.
And is there a specific amount of alcohol that you start to notice skin changes?
If someone's having 2 glasses of wine on Friday and Saturday nights, is that enough to make an impact on the skin?
I haven't really looked into that specifically. I've pretty much always just been of the belief, and now we know that there's really no safe level of alcohol for anything. I just try to embrace that with my patients and, of course, try to get them to reduce the amount, but really no alcohol is the best alcohol. And obviously, with cigarette smoking,
Just not good. Not good for your skin.
What about stress? Do you see stress causing changes in the skin?
definitely stress, definitely on an individual patient level, you will see that. But I think we know this as well based on studies. But stress, of course, that's why you get someone will come in with, oh, I have this giant breakout because I'm studying for finals. So, certainly with acne, certainly with things like rosacea, with psoriasis, all of these conditions. And it's interesting because, like, when I was training, we really didn't talk about these lifestyle contributions to these conditions, but I think they definitely do exist. And also, just stress overall will make our skin not function as well. There are a lot of different mechanisms, but yes, we should all be, I think, mitigating our stress, however that is, with exercise, mindfulness, meditating, all these things that I know you guys probably talk about with your patients too, if we want overall health, the skin being a good reflection of that.
So, to switch over and give us a good walk away message here, I would love for you to, and we'll just do two different age groups because I think that's helpful. Because I do love that you're passionate about helping some of the younger population as well, and they're interested to hear this stuff. So, if you have a tween or a teenager, someone in their early 20s, bare minimum, not the maximum, bare minimum should they do in the morning, and what should they do bare minimum in the evening in that age group? What should their skincare routine look like?
Bare minimum in the morning, they're using a sunscreen, and at night, they're using a cleanser and a moisturizer. Pretty easy.
Yes, very easy. Hopefully that message is heard. And then now let's flip over to my and Kitty's age and those older than us even. How does that change over time? What should we be doing bare minimum morning, evening routines?
I think that's the bare minimum for anyone. But if you have other issues, if you're worried about aging gracefully or you already have brown spots or wrinkles, then you need to potentially add things or at least choose products that address some of those concerns. You may be able to do that without adding things. Like, for example, you could get a moisturizer with a retinol and just still keep a very simple routine.
And when we're talking about using retinol products, when is the best time to use those?
Great question. So there are some forms of retinoids that can be used morning or evening, but most of them are inactivated by sun exposure. It's simplest to just keep that as part of your nighttime routine.
And is that you wash your face first, moisturizer, if it's not a part of your moisturizer, which comes first?
Yeah, if you're using a separate retinoid product, that would go on first and then your moisturizer on top. Now, if you're struggling to tolerate the retinoid you're using, there's something called the sandwich method that gets talked about. And so basically you put a thin layer of your moisturizer on, then your retinoid, and then another layer of your moisturizer, and that can improve tolerability if that's an issue. But largely, yes, before the moisturizer.
Someone that's just worrying about aging, because you had mentioned just a couple of these buckets, is that sufficient, or is that something you also really are like, hey, you should also add that vitamin C because you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck?
Yeah, I think you get a good amount of bang for your buck with adding the vitamin C, and vitamin C is in the morning.
Okay.
Ideally.
Before or after that sunscreen?
Before. And some sunscreens are formulated with it in there, really thinking of it as like more of the antioxidant part. Yes.
So, as I mentioned, when I finally started my own skincare routine, I got my advice from my sister, who is not in the medical field, but is always way more up on the trends than I am. But I think people think of the dermatologist as someone they see if they have a rash or a problem with their skin. And when it comes to just trying to do something to help aging or from a preventive standpoint, they don't know where to go. And they might look on social media or they might go see an esthetician. Where do you recommend people go to get that individual advice for themselves?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Not every dermatologist is as skilled or has, frankly, the practice type that they can go into an extensive skincare routine. But most of us, even in a traditional practice, can give some broad guidance. Okay, start this retinoid, start a vitamin C, be sure you're wearing your sunscreen. But to delve into specifics, most derms will work with an esthetician. I feel like that's a common setup. And so they may refer you for more specific product recommendations to someone like an esthetician that they work with. On social media, estheticians, I do think are a reasonable source of information. Obviously, some of the dermatologists on social media. I think that some of the cosmetic chemists out there put out some great information too. Sometimes plastic surgeons, but that can get a little hairy, a little dicey sometimes. But these are really the types of people that I encourage, particularly like younger people, but really any age, to turn to if they have questions and they can't get into a dermatologist. Those are at least somewhat maybe more reliable voices on social media. But in person, an esthetician, a derm can be a really great choice.
And speaking of social media, there's so many things out there. Are there any things that you are seeing trending right now that literally are a waste of people's money?
Okay. There's a lot. Have you guys heard of beef tallow?
Yes.
Are you fans of beef tallow?
No.
Okay. I wanted to be sure I was in a safe space.
Yeah, you're safe. You're safe here.
Yeah, so beef tallow is like all the rage right now. And it does have some moisturizing properties, but it is an occlusive type of product, similar to what your experience would be like putting Vaseline on. Maybe it's not quite as ointment-like, but it's still this occlusive product. And it's basically touted now as a cure for everything. It cures acne. It's going to protect you from the sun. It is going to help your brown spots. Oh, it can't do any of these things. And it is going to eventually give you acne. And now you're going to get skin cancer because you're using it as sunscreen. So it's just crazy right now. And really have found that most people touting the benefits of beef tallow, like they sell beef tallow. This is a whole thing. Beef tallow people are also very passionate about their beef tallow. Anytime I say anything about beef tallow, I get a lot of criticism. Anyway, so beef tallow is a huge one. Other ones not worth your money. So I definitely do not think those face tapes, like I mentioned earlier, could be helpful with sleeping, but I don't think that they replace Botox or remove the wrinkles that you already have. All these products that say that they're like Botox in a bottle, that does not exist. So don't waste your money on that. Those are the things I can think of off the top of my head.
No, that's helpful.
Were there ones that you guys wondered about otherwise, trends out there?
PRP in skincare. Is it useful in dermatology?
Yeah, it's been used for quite some time in derm. This was part of the vampire facials was talked about like years ago or whatever. I think one of the Kardashians made that popular. So yeah, I definitely think it's effective with microneedling. Now people are sometimes injecting PRP or more commonly PRF, which is more of a gel that can be made out of the PRP so that it lingers a bit longer wherever you inject it. A lot of people use it under the eyes for rejuvenation. I think it kinda maybe it helps. I like it with microneedling. I like the PRP with microneedling. I'm not sure about the injectable forms. Maybe it helps. I guess it probably can't hurt unless it's injected into a vessel, which is one of the risks associated with filler when it's more in that gel form.
And then the last one, because it is all over social media, the red light face mask.
Yeah, I'm actually a fan of red light.
I got one for Mother's Day.
Yeah, photomodulation is a thing. And yeah, it delivers energy to the cells, improves mitochondrial function. So it improves that cell function. I do think it has to be a device that's adequately powered. So there's a handful that you see everywhere. And I think those are like pretty reasonable products. I see sometimes these versions that are very inexpensive or these little wands. And I just don't think that they're doing anything. I knew you were going to ask me about the red light. I was wondering when that was coming.
And is it worth people investigating and trying to find clean beauty products? Because I know that's something that a lot of people are trying to look into more because we know there's such a wide variety of what comes in many beauty products. Is there something that can be helpful to help people navigate this?
Yeah, so clean beauty is a marketing term. There is no standard set of rules that make something clean. It can mean whatever a brand wants it to mean. And it's largely, hey, these products are not safe, so you should use this. So it's like a marketing and like fear-based tactic to sell products, in my opinion. Now, that being said, I am all for trying to reduce exposures to unnecessary things. I don't hate the idea of clean beauty, but we need to have some rules about it. And there are some companies, there is this, it's called Credo, and basically they are trying to set forth some standards for clean beauty. And then brands could potentially say, oh, like I meet these criteria.
I'm glad to hear that might be coming because I think it's something that many of us want, but like it confuses me on trying to figure out the differences when they're arguing what is better.
Yeah, and it gets it to be a very dicey and complicated discussion because who are we listening to that says that this ingredient is bad and what is the science behind that? A lot of things now have been deemed endocrine disruptor, for example, and a lot of that is based on laboratory assays. And is that relevant at all to an actual living system? Talking to cosmetic chemists and toxicologists, there are some of these guys out there who do such a great job discussing this because it really is complicated. And a lot of these terms are thrown around, and we just really don't know that they're actually a problem in a human.
And yeah, and I think that's what makes it hard because it's yes, this definitely could be a problem, but we just don't know. And I think I love that someone is working on we need to be able to provide more information for people to make educated decisions. And this market was just way behind on providing that clarity.
And the thing is that the beauty industry is not regulated like a medical industry.
Right.
Cosmetics, there's no rules, there's little regulation except for sunscreen is a drug, so that's why there are rules there. But everything else is just like whatever you want to do. And there's these groups, the Environmental Working Group, and some apps that are based off that information that they don't take into account that concentrations of things matter, and it's just not easy to tease all this out.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that I agree. That's hard.
This has been so helpful. You have given us a lot of great thoughts and helped us simplify down to just the main things that we know we need to be doing.
Yes, because when you start from the bottom, I'm kind of like Kitty. I was behind on this. It helps me realize, okay, I've got the bare minimum and I can slowly work up from there, as well as understanding some of these things I'm seeing on social media that should stay away from.
Speaking of social media, though, I do want to bring up your Instagram because it is so helpful. I feel like you are really focused on giving people practical, helpful, everyday advice instead of these more extreme things you see so many people doing. So, highly encourage you to follow her on Instagram. But can you also tell people where they might be able to find you and how someone could possibly come see you?
Sure. So certainly if someone is local, you can find out more about my practice on my website, which is just my name, brookejeffymd.com. And on social media, my account is Brooke Jeffy MD on both TikTok and Instagram.
Do you do any televisits?
Oh, actually, I do televisits. I do televisits in Kentucky, actually. I do offer virtual care in Kentucky through my
There we go.
website.
Yeah.
I almost forgot about that.
I was like, nope, we need to hear that.
We have to set one up because Sarah and I still have a long list of questions we didn't get to.
I know we're probably going to have you back on because we tried to do our basic level questions, but we have 2 tiers of questions that we need answered. So just remember
would love
that,
that.
or we'll just have to schedule our own televisit.
I would love that. But yeah, if you guys have yourselves or patients and you want to schedule for anything, just let me know. Obviously, there are limitations with virtual dermatology in terms of like skin exams and such, but other things, it's pretty doable.
I know that both Kitty and I have learned a lot, and we are always trying to come up with new ideas for our show. So if you like what you heard, please be sure to share the show with others, as well as be sure to give us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts where you're listening to us today. And if you have any other ideas for upcoming shows, please send us a text or email us at contact@thestartinggatepodcast.com. We really look forward to hearing from you and have loved some of the feedback we've received so far.
Join us back next week where we will be talking with Dr. Kyle Rosenstein, an endocrinologist here, to give us all the answers on hypothyroidism. Look forward to seeing you next time.